Forbidden to drive. Denied education. Forced to wear burqas and veils. Unequal rights. Honor killings. Segregation. These are some of the contentious issues that are often raised regarding Muslim women. But who are Muslim women? What does the religion Islam say about women? Does Islam give women rights? Does Islam treat women as equals? Does Islam provide for the full participation of women in society?
Most people have a lot of misperceptions about Islam. Issues about oppression of women, issues about men making all of the decisions in Islam, issues about, God being a different God than one might worship in Christianity. All those were issues I had to learn to be able to speak to as a new Muslim.
For many people, fleeting images and sensational headlines from the media have been their only source of information about Muslim women. The media often only portrays fragments of information and quick glimpses into the lives of Muslim women. So the question many of us ask is, what does the religion of Islam say about women? Before we begin to answer this question, let us first understand, what is Islam?
Islam to me means peace. Most people wouldn't guess that, but Islam means peace, and the concept of peace has a dual meaning. And in Arabic, which the word Islam comes from, Islam also means submission to God, completely submitting to God, which makes a person at peace. So it really matches well, peace and submission to God.
Women not voting, that's not Islam. Women not being taken care of in their family unit, that's not Islam. Women not being able to make choices or having access to inheritance, that's not Islam. Islam gave women more rights than any Western system ever created, especially for Americans here, the right to vote. When were we able to vote? Women in Islam were voting back in the 600s. I think we have a lot to learn from a different system.
Islam teaches human beings that men and women are accountable for their own lives. As individuals, we answer only to God, as it is God that we worship and to whom we submit.
Allah is the God of Abraham. In Arabic, when you want to say God, you say Allah. God and Allah represent the same being. And we don't worship Allah and other people worship God. We worship the same Creator.
Allah is the Arabic name for God, the one and only God that Jews, Christians, and all monotheistic faiths worship. As we now better understand the true meaning of Islam, we must make a crucial distinction: the distinction between Islam and Muslims. Islam, the religion, lays out clear parameters for its followers. Unfortunately, followers of Islam, Muslims, do not always follow those tenets.
I always think to myself that I'm glad that I learned Islam and from the Quran and the holy books. I'm glad that I didn't learn Islam from the Muslims, because the example that Muslims show isn't always the example that Islam teaches. And there's not a better example of that than with the situation of women's rights and how women are treated in many countries. For example, the Taliban treated women very badly and said, no, women shall not be educated. That was a horrible circumstance. Women are supposed to be educated in Islam, and the Taliban was teaching absolutely the opposite of Islamic teachings. So they were using Islam, hiding behind Islam to sort of forward their political agenda.
Islam clearly forbids injustice and violence, yet many people who call themselves Muslims disobey the teachings and spirit of Islam. Some Muslim women suffer greatly from acts of injustice that are direct violations of Islam's teachings. The way Islam is practiced varies greatly among Muslims as well as throughout history. As we continue to explore the treatment of women in Islam, we will focus on the tenets of Islam, the religion, and how it gives women rights and protects those rights. To truly appreciate how Islam liberated women and protects their rights, we must first understand the bleak circumstances in which Islam was formed. Islam was formed as a result of the prophethood of Muhammad.
The Prophet Muhammad was surrounded by women all of his life, and women were extremely important to him at every stage of his life. He loved women, he respected women, he held them in great esteem, and he relied on their counsel.
Muhammad was born in the year 570 into a society that gave women no rights. This pre-Islamic society viewed women as property to be inherited, bought, sold, or simply disposed of as men saw fit. Muhammad came at a time when daughters were considered evil, and fathers would bury their infant daughters alive out of shame and guilt. Muhammad and the teachings of Islam changed all of that.
Islam began, it said, in the arms of a woman. Because when the revelation first came to the prophet, when the angel Gabriel first came to the prophet, he didn't want to be a prophet. He didn't ask to be a prophet. And he was overwhelmed by the revelation that his wife Khadija took him and she sheltered him and she covered him and she told him not to fear and she strengthened him and she always stood by him for those first 10 years until she passed away.
Khadija was 15 years older than Muhammad and a widow when she broke with tradition and chose to propose to him. Muhammad accepted her proposal and married her. Khadija became his love, his best friend, his financial and business manager, and closest advisor. The example of the loving and respectful relationship between Muhammad and Khadija provides Muslim women with a positive role model, a confident, intelligent, loving, and most of all, pious woman.
In terms of looking up to women as role models, as wives, as independent women, in many different ways, I think one of the women I look up to is Khadija, the wife of the Prophet. Again and again, I see her as an independent woman, a wealthy woman, a woman who had brains and beauty, and she was just graceful and good and kind, and I think what a great example.
Muslim women have a number of role models to choose from. At a time when Europe was still debating whether a woman had a soul or not, Muslim women throughout the Islamic Empire were excelling in all fields as scholars, builders, scientists, and patrons of art and culture.
As a Muslim, I have no limits, and I'm very proud to hold this position and to try to provide understanding for my community and let people know that who we are and understand us a little better. We're just like everybody else. I think under Islamic traditions and Muslim beliefs that women are allowed to be political in public. I think that it dates back to the days of the Prophet. Women spoke their minds and they were asked to come forth and give their opinions, and I think today women are still doing the same thing.
The rights and equal status given to women by Muhammad resulted in an unprecedented growth in the contributions of women in society.
Women do have the right to own property and to earn a living in Islam. Those were rights that were given to women over 1400 years ago, where it was unheard of in the West.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave women that opportunity to be active politically. He gave them rights through God's command.
In contemporary terms, we would call Prophet Muhammad a dedicated women's rights advocate. When he migrated to the city of Medina, Muhammad established the first Muslim city-state and ensured that all its citizens had equal rights, regardless of their gender.
The marketplace in Medina, the city of the Prophet, was sometimes under the direction of a woman. Even in the days of the Caliphate, the rule that came after the Prophet, marketplaces were sometimes put under the authorization and the direction of women, which not only tells you the importance of women, but it also shows you that there were lots of women in the marketplace.
Islam honors many women, and the Quran reveres one woman in particular. Muslim women look up to Mary, the mother of Jesus, as a great role model, a symbol of piety, of submission to God, of chastity and purity. Significantly, a chapter of the Muslims' holy book, the Quran, is named after Mary. The Quran speaks of Mary in the following terms.
The angel said, O Mary, God has chosen you and purified you and chosen you above all the women of all nations. O Mary, God gives you good news of a word from Him whose name is the Messiah, Jesus, son of Mary, honored in this world and in the hereafter, and one of those brought near to God. He shall speak to the people in infancy and in old age, and shall be of the righteous. She said, O my Lord, how shall I have a son when no man has touched me? He said, even so, God creates what He wills. When He decrees a thing, He says to it, be, and it is.
Mary's story is an empowering example for Muslim women. She was a woman devoted to God who had to strive against great difficulties in order to carry out the great responsibility God assigned her with. It is this strength of character in Mary that is admired by Muslim women, as well as her piety and modesty. In fact, if you will notice, the Virgin Mary is always depicted in modest attire with her hair covered with a scarf or piece of fabric, what a Muslim might call a hijab.
Muslim women in Islam wear a head covering or a special type of dress. So it's more than just covering your hair. It's a code of conduct as well. And this symbolizes our religion. It symbolizes the honor that a woman has. It also symbolizes her status. It's a protection.
Hijab is a modest appearance. For a Muslim woman, hijab can come in many different forms. It is modesty in clothing in a way that I think the focus is on inside, on intelligence, on personality and character, and not on outward beauty that is something we can't control necessarily.
Modesty, as an Islamic concept, applies to both men and women. The Quran clearly commands men and women to lower their gaze, to be modest, to guard their chastity.
I knew that in this religion, modesty is part of it. And that's one of the things, another one of the reasons why I chose to become Muslim, is because before 14, I was living a life where I guess appearance meant a lot. And I was thrown into a lot of modeling competitions. And there would be times when I'd be walking on a runway up and down, and these men would just be looking at me with a judgmental eye, measuring your measurements like you're an object. And I don't feel that anyone should ever be treated that way. And I don't feel that women should put themselves in that situation, because it's degrading and it's demonizing, and I don't see any freedom in a situation like that. The ultimate freedom for me was wearing the hijab, and it made me become my own person. It made other people view me by my intellect and by my heart and what I had to say and who I was as a person. And I think that was the most enlightening thing that could have ever happened to me.
A common misconception is that Islam compels Muslim women to dress the way they do. Muslim women and men have the freedom to live their lives as they please. Freedom of conscience is central to Islam. There can be no compulsion in religion.
I never felt like my being Muslim could stop me from doing anything I wanted to do, such as playing sports, going outdoors, going shopping, driving a car, anything like that.
There are other roles for women laid out in Islam: marriage, motherhood, education, and being an active participant in society are all roles discussed in Islam. The Islamic marriage is a sacred contract between a willing woman and a willing man. There can be no coercion. In other words, women cannot be forced to marry against their will. In addition to this protection of rights, the bride has the right to include in the marriage contract any conditions she feels necessary as a means of protecting her rights.
In Islam, a woman does have the right to choose who she's going to marry. It's very important for her to be part of that choice because ultimately she's the one who's going to be living with that person and enjoying life with that person. When a woman gets married, she gets something called the mahr, or a marital gift from her husband, and nobody is allowed to touch that. Her father doesn't get it, her husband doesn't get it, nobody is allowed to touch that money, and that is solely hers, and she can invest it. She can invest it in property, she can invest it in businesses, she can use it for whichever, as a nest egg even, and that's something that she's always had the right to have.
Motherhood is another important role for women in Islam. Having children, educating and raising them as good human beings is the responsibility of both parents.
As a mother, in my role, I see myself, my primary role is to ensure that my child or my children understand Islamic codes in terms of their belief. They understand who they are, they're educated, and they understand who we are, what our role is, where we come from, and where we're going. And that this life is only temporal, and that there's a hereafter. I think these are the most important things for me to instill, in my children.
A man once came to Prophet Muhammad and asked, "O Messenger of God, who among the people is most worthy of my companionship?" The Prophet replied, "Your mother." The man then asked again, "Who next?" The Prophet replied, "Your mother." The man repeated the question and got the same answer. The man asked a fourth time, "Who next?" Only then did the Prophet reply, "Your father."
In Islam, our parents have a right for our loyalty, for our respect, Our parents, we must listen to our parents and do exactly what they say when they say it, if it's within the Islamic, and if it's appropriate, within the religion. But they have that right, and we should listen to them and we should obey them. And I think one of the most poignant things for me in Islam is that paradise is at the feet of your mother. I mean, what a beautiful way to express how important our parents are. If you want to find the true way to righteousness, if you want to find the way to your Lord, do what your mother says.
It is a right of children to be provided a stable and loving home. It is also their right to pursue an education. Islam requires both men and women to pursue an education. Islam also requires of women that they should be active participants in society, working towards peace and justice.
Islam treats men and women equally. They are different, and they have different roles and different duties and responsibilities, but those duties and responsibilities are equal. I can't say that all Muslim men and Muslim women treat each other equally. I see the more people deviate from what has been prescribed by God to follow, the more there is not equality in the sexes.
In some areas of the world, Muslim women are prevented from fully participating in society. Many of those women are speaking out and asserting their right, their responsibility to participate fully in every aspect of society. Muslim women work today for the good of society as activists, entrepreneurs, health professionals, homemakers, leaders, mothers, scholars, scientists, social workers, and teachers. Muslim women excel in all fields, not in spite of their religious convictions, but because of them.